Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Access Granted. I'm your host, Grant Chachere, and today is the start of the college football season. Um, it started on Thursday, but this is the first big Saturday that we're gonna have for the college football season. I got a lot to talk about. We're gonna talk about Tulane first. Marlon Favorite, former LSU defensive lineman, former NFL defensive lineman, will join the show later on to discuss the upcoming matchup that LSU has with USC. That'll take place tomorrow, and also I'll go break down some predictions for all the college football games happening this weekend. But first, let's talk about a little bit about Tulane's victory over Southeastern. 52-0 was the final score in their victory over Southeastern, and it was a pretty impressive game. I was watching it on TV, and really electric crowd. I mean, Tulane student section was in full force. I believe it was a sellout crowd, and that's pretty impressive given that it was against Southeastern. It was a game that Tulane was supposed to win, but it just shows how much Tulane has grown as a program over the last 5 to 10 years. I mean, beforehand, Tulane people got to realize this. A little over 20 years ago, there was a discussion whether or not Tulane should even have a football program. So just truly amazing where how fast this program has grown in the last 5 to 10 years after years and years of mediocrity. Um, but breaking down the game, Darian Menton his first start, it surprised a lot of people that he was named the starter, given that they brought in Ty Thompson to the transfer portal, and then Kai Horton also has some game experience as well. Given the fact that he started the bowl game, I believe he started the bowl game last year, and then also started the game against Ole Miss, which was a pretty big matchup for him. But Darian Menson was a starter, the redshirt freshman. He was nearly perfect, going 10 for 12 with 205 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he averaged 17.1 yards per pass. So he's really impressive, and also go along with 2 rushes for 14 yards. Tulane was able to run the ball pretty effectively, running for 241 yards, 4 touchdowns. Makai Hughes led the way with 59 yards, 14 carries for 59 yards and a touchdown. Shoddy Clayton Johnson had 4 rushes for 48 yards. So that's averaging 12 yards per carry, so good for him, given what he's gone through throughout, because he was a legend at Warren Easton High School, and he had to battle injuries and whatnot. So it's good that he was able to have a pretty good game against Southeastern, going for having 4 carries for 48 yards. On the receiving end, Mario Williams 4 catches for 124 yards, averaged 31 yards per catch. He did not get a touchdown, but he's going to be a huge piece for the Tulane offense moving forward in the passing game. Alex Bowman, 2 catches for 26 yards and a touchdown. Keith Brown, 2 catches for 23 yards and a touchdown. So Tulane's passing game seems like it's doing just fine. Tulane, what a way to open up the season. Next weekend they'll play Kansas State, Kansas State's going to come in as a top 25 team, given if they beat UT Martin, which they should. But Tulane is going to have a pretty big matchup at UM Stadium next week, and I expect that crowd to be rock as a cell. Well, let's also talk about some matchups for today in college football. Of course, you have the two opening games with Clemson, Georgia, Penn State, and West Virginia. I'll have Georgia beating Clemson pretty handily. I think Georgia's offense is really good. Carson Beck is a lot better than a lot of people think of him just because he plays for Georgia's offense. It's not necessarily the flashiest offense, but he's a damn good quarterback. I think he'll be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft this upcoming year. Georgia's offense is always going to be very good. Even though it doesn't look like it, just given how they play, but they're actually a very effective offense. And I believe they've averaged over 450 yards of offense the last 2 years. Clemson, the thing about Clemson is that they're not really the same juggernaut offensively as they used to be. They're always going to be a defensive team. They're always going to have a strong defense, but offensively, it's not the same as when they had Taj Boyd and Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence. you name it. I mean, it's not that same offense. And also what's hurting Clemson too is that they're not really recruiting well, and a lot of that has to do with Dabo Swinney not really buying into all the NIL hype, and also just his refusal to use the transfer portal. Um, Dabo Swinney is the perfect example. Let's just break this down. So, for any of you guys who maybe millennials or probably my age, you guys are probably familiar with the song 1985 by Bowling for Soup. And the song is basically about somebody who is still caught up. Like the song was made in 2004, but it was somebody who was still caught up in the 80s, how they lived their prime throughout their 80s, 70s and 80s. And then now it's 2004, and things have changed so much that they've fallen behind. That's Dabo Swinney in a nutshell. Dabo Swinney is still buying into this the amateurism of college sports, and really you could make the argument that there's really never been amateurism in college sports. I don't think there ever has been, even though it says by the bylaws, schools are paying players under the tables forever, right? I mean, it's always been a multi-billion-dollar business. To me, that's not amateurism. That's just straight up just like capitalism. It's college football in general has always been a semi-pro minor league sport. It always has been. That's why I never really bought into the amateurism of college sports and the student athlete, because they're making billions upon billions of dollars for the NCAA and all these universities. I truly think it's just I've never really bought into it, and that's why I've always felt like players should be paid in some capacity. Maybe not like by salary, but they should definitely because I'm not sure how that's going to work. I'm not really an expert in that, but I know that what the NIL is a good thing, because athletes should have been profiting off their name, image, and likeness forever. I think that's basically what the players have been advocating for forever, with Johnny Manziel and all these different players. But Johnny Manziel was kind of the first player to kind of start that debate when he got in trouble for getting money for signing autographs. But anyway, that's how I always felt about that aspect. But I got Georgia winning handily over Clemson, West Virginia, Penn State. I'm leaning Penn State, but I would not be shocked if West Virginia were able to pull it off. West Virginia lost against Penn State last year, 38-15. And West Virginia, I was looking at, because this actually used to be a big time rivalry. West Virginia and Penn State used to play each other every single year from 1940 through 1992. But rivalry ended when Penn State joined the Big Ten and West Virginia joined the Big East. But West Virginia's only won 9 times in their rivalry. Penn State's 49-9. I believe in that rivalry. If I'm looking at, I think that's what it was. But Penn State's dominated this rivalry, since its inception. I think it'd be a close game, because playing at Milan Puskar Stadium, Morgantown, West Virginia, has always been a very, very tough place to play. But I think it's going to be a close one. Probably leaning towards like 31-28 Penn State. But West Virginia has a good coach in Neil Brown, and I expect them to make this game very, very interesting. Another game that everyone should watch for is Miami, Florida. Miami will be the number 19 team in the country, will be traveling to Gainesville to take on Florida in a highly anticipated matchup. This is a very important game for both coaches. Of course, Billy Napier's on the hot seat, given that he's had 2 straight losing seasons in Florida, and also they just have a brutal, brutal schedule. So if you get a big win here, that could change the course for the rest of the season. And Miami is a very important game for Barry Cristobal, as he's trying to reestablish this Miami program to what it used to be, to what people were used to seeing from Miami from the 80s to the mid 2000s. Of just dominant physical football, flashy offenses, celebrating in the end zone, celebrating on the defense. The whole Miami swagger thing. And also, he was a large part of that. He was offensive lineman for Miami in the late 80s, and early 90s when they're in their prime of a program. And, but him, Amari Cristobal has always been, he's not really a big game coach, as he's been a suspect play caller, even given his time at Oregon. So, this is a very big game for him to bring Miami back on the map. Miami's been seen as a dark horse pick to make it to college football playoff because a lot of people have them win the ACC this year, given that it's weaker than it was in previous years. So this is a big game for both programs, but I'm going to get Miami in a close one. Um, I know, this game used to be a big time rivalry before Florida decided to stop playing Miami, but I got Miami winning a close one, and this reestablishment of this once great rivalry. Um, Moving on to another big time game is of course the nightcap, which is Notre Dame Texas A&M. Notre Dame, of course, number 7 team in the country. Notre Dame, not since I've been alive, has never really been a big game type of team. I think this is a trap game for Notre Dame. I really like A&M, given that their head coach has exceeded expectations really at Duke because Duke is, before he took over, wasn't really. I mean, they had success under Cutcliffe, but near the end of Cutcliffe, they weren't really rolling like they used to during Cutcliffe's time at Duke when he was highly successful, leading them to the ACC championship in 2013. But he took over, what a lot of people thought was going to be a bad program. A lot of people picked him to be last in the ACC in Mike Elko's first year at Duke. And they ended up going 9-4 last year. I believe they went 8-5, despite losing Riley Leonard for the remainder of the year. Riley Leonard, of course, ironically, is the quarterback in Notre Dame. So I think this is a very interesting matchup, given that Mike Elko is a defensive coach. He's a great defensive mastermind. And, the great thing is when you already know the other quarterback's strengths and weaknesses because he once played under you, I think that plays a massive advantage to A&M, especially when they're at home at Kyle Field, which is a very, very tough place to play. I got A&M winning and a close one. I think A&M's going to upset Notre Dame, and they're going to start 1-0. Anyway, pretty soon here, we're going to have Marlon Favorite, so stay tuned. All right, guys, we have on a very special guest. This is former LSU defensive lineman, Marlon Big Right Favorite. He was a huge part of LSU's 2007 national championship team, and he's also now a radio host. So, Marlon, welcome to the show.
Man, thanks for having me on, Grant. I appreciate you as we get ready to get this season rolling.
Yes, sir. Hey, can you tell everybody your radio show that you have on now that you started not too long ago?
So inside the trenches, we've been on ESPN since this spring. This is actually my second time coming on ESPN as Inside the Trenches host. Started back in 2016, doing my thing with the show, and then me and Gus continue to do our Mondays and Fridays on the Sports Hangover. And before you know it, it was just time to get back on board and get the show rolling. So it's been great.
And where can people find you on the radio?
100.3 FM, ESPN New Orleans. We're on starting in September. We're going back to a 5-day schedule. We want to do a 1-day schedule over the summer, just for the simple fact of sports being slow, and particularly football being slow. I'm gonna say that. So I'm glad to have the show back on full throttle.
Yeah, and now football is going a little bit faster. As today, college football officially starts. It started on Thursday, of course, last Saturday, and then Thursday started the slew of games. But today is the big day. So, Marlon, who are you liking all the games so far today?
So today, man, I have a toss up with the Texas A&M Notre Dame game. I just feel like Texas A&M being an SEC team, they're typically a lot more competitive on these type of stages. So I guess I'll go Texas A&M. I'll go Georgia. I think Georgia beats Clemson. Clemson doesn't really have that firepower that they used to have. Am I missing the game? I feel like it's 3 today.
It's Miami and Florida, and then Penn State and West Virginia.
So I'll take West Virginia. No, I'll take Penn State over West Virginia. I'll take I'll take Florida over Miami. I think
Ooh.
that might be an upset tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, because this is why I feel that way. I feel like Coach Billy Napier back is against the wall. Napier has his back against the wall, and he has to fight to try to keep a job. So he has the talent there. I'm familiar. You and I are both familiar with like Montrell Johnson
Mhm.
from De La Salle. He has Caden Jones from De La Salle, and I think they have a couple of other key pieces that'll be vital for them this season. But I mean, non-conference game, you better try to get that win because it's gonna get ugly if you don't.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, because I mean their schedule is absolutely brutal. I mean they're like second half of this season is just absolutely brutal, and then also the beginning I think they have UCF, and that's gonna be a tough matchup. They have a couple tough matchups even early on, but later in the season they want to get to a good start right now because as the schedule as the season goes along, it's just going to get tougher and tougher. But Marlon, we brought you on. Well, I brought you on to talk about the upcoming matchup between LSU and USC. Of course, you're a former LSU player on the defensive line. So, how are you feeling about the defensive line going into this game? I know the defensive ends look great, but the interior is a little suspect given the lack of depth. I know Ahmad Bros emerged as a guy who's going to play along the defensive line, according to Brian Kelly. But what are you looking forward to in this matchup with the defensive line?
A couple things I'm looking forward to. I'm looking for a little bit of improvement in the interior line, particularly out of a guy like Jacobin Guillory, who's been in the program now for a while. And even according to Coach Kelly, he has made some of the best improve. He has improved quite well over the spring and the fall. And I know a lot of that has to do with the coaching staff now. They're in good hands with particularly on the defensive line with Bo Davis, with Kevin People. These are two guys who've coached some talent and on a college level and have some guys in the pros now. I mean, most recently for Bo Davis is Byron Murphy III out of Texas. So, in my opinion, they have all the necessary tools to be good up front. So, taking on the coaching, you know how it is with fans. Sometimes you just don't know what to expect. You just know what you saw last year. And you see a guy like Savion Jones, you see a guy like Jacobin Guillory, who's been on the roster now. So Swan, has been on the roster for a while now. So my expectations aren't super high in terms of improvement, but in terms of getting better every game and improving throughout the course of the season, I think the D line with the coaching now is going to be able to see some success.
Yeah, and how big of that was for LSU to not only get Kevin Peoples but also get Bo Davis. I've been trying to get Bo Davis, I know, for a while, but Bo Davis, of course, is one of the best defensive line coaches regardless of level, and it's also a fantastic recruiter. So, what do you have to say about those two hires?
Excellent hires across the board. I think Coach Kelly really showed that he wanted to make those improvements in the areas that need. I mean, in a historically bad defense last year. I mean, you take that defense out of the equation and put the 19 defense in there. I still think we're in a better position as far as LSU goes, um, and going to the national championship. Like this was really like one of the best offenses in college. This was the best offense in college football last year. I mean, Oregon was up there. You had USC offense was up there last year. So you had some key offenses, but you had Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams, the first and second pick in this year's draft, back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners. So you look at the team as a whole and the opportunities that's there. These two teams are in the same position, right? You have two great minds in Coach Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly. Coach Kelly's known for, in my opinion, uh, having some good offensive lines. Even as one at LSU now, but you think back to Notre Dame with like Quinn Nelson and Mike McClincy and those guys who are all pro right now in the NFL. You know, they come from under Coach Coach Kelly's tutelage. And at the same token, you even have a player like Isaiah Foskey for the Saints. I spoke with Isaiah the other day. We were training. I was just talking to him about his time in Notre Dame and he was talking about Brian Kelly, the coach. So, and then on the other end, Lincoln Riley. I mean, it's not even silent. He is the quarterback guy, right? You look at his track record with Baker Mayfield, Spencer Rattler. You had Caleb Williams. So these are guys that won Heisman's. Well, he has
Yeah.
3 Heisman Trophy winners.
He's got Kyler Murray, also won the Heisman. Then the year after, Jalen Hurts was his quarterback.
That's right. That's right. So I mean, he and then it continues Spencer Rattler, Caleb Williams. Before that, Baker Mayfield. I mean, this guy. So when you look at a guy like Miller Moss, who was a first-year starter like Gary Nussmeier, both of them had similar bowl games in regards to having the MVP and being successful. And the fact that Coach Riley didn't go after a quarterback heavy in the portal speaks volumes about Miller. So our defense do have you got to tell her 2 questionable defensive lines, 2 powerhouse offenses, and 2 great minds at the coaching helm. So LSU should win, but I don't think we like beat the brakes off of them. I do think
Right.
we went handsomely, but because we're the better team across the board, I think we're a lot more physical. Even though Miller and Nussmeier had similar backgrounds in regards to both back Heisman Trophy quarterbacks last year, there has to be some type of improvement in that, being in that quarterback room. So I'm interested in seeing how these two play out tomorrow.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And I think there's a lot of similarities between the two teams. Of course, they both bring in new defensive staffs. USC brought in D'Anton Lynn, who's a great defensive coordinator over UCLA, where they're one of the best in the country. And then also, LSU brought in Blake Baker, who Missouri is also another bad defense, and they transformed their defense to becoming one of the best in the country. So, who do you think has the better defense going this game? Because they're both very similar. They've both been in new guys. They both have to, restructure the defenses. So, I think that's a pretty intriguing matchup in terms of that. Because I think they're both going to give up yards, but who's going to stop the other offense more?
I have to get that, and I'm not being biased. Of course, us being Louisianians, I think LSU has it. And I'm gonna just say Harold Perkins. They don't have a Harold Perkins on their defense. So where LSU's D line may be viewed as mediocre, USC's D line may be viewed as mediocre. We have a national ranked linebacker on our team up for multiple national awards in Harold Perkins. So the fact that we have that X factor kind of evens out the defense, right? You hit the head pin, the rest fall right in position. If the linebacker is a guy like Coach Baker, who is a silent linebacker developer, Patrick Queen. I can only imagine how this thing is going to look for Harold Perkins. Last week we had our alumni practice. Well, all the former players went and watched LSU practice last week, and they put together a nice little practice for us to kind of see how the offense look, how the defense look. We're back to a running back by committee up on the on the offensive side of the ball with our running backs. John Emery, national champion running back, was a part of that whole vibe, that culture. So you have that on the team. He's an explosive player. One thing you can expect out of John Emery is he may not be the starter, but when you need a big play, he's your guy.
Definitely.
You have your leader in Josh Williams. Josh, he's just, to me, when you look at that running back room, nothing is really flashy about Josh Williams. But what's great about him is he is reliable. He don't put the ball on the ground a lot. He's going to get that first down. He runs hard. The superstar in that running back core right now is Caleb Jackson out of Liberty. He's fast, strong, put me in the mindset of Allie Broussard. So you have a good offensive line and you have a running back by committee. I mean, we run the ball down their throats. That's going to happen. I mean, with the skill set of their defensive line and the number one offensive line in the country with those running backs, that looks good. Who's going to be the superstar in the receiving core? I mean, everybody's saying that's Kyron Lace's job off dumping. He's the number one receiver, but he's going to be the one who's going to stand out. But what other two receivers in that receiving core is gonna really make some noise? And maybe a third. I know uh, Green tends was that
It
Trey
is
Dance
green.
Green. Oh my gosh! In practice last week, man, that boy a dog. He's gonna play as a freshman. He could potentially be receiver 3,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I know you have your guy, you get the ball in space, and Anderson. You have Hilton, so you may have Hilton 1, Lacey. I mean Hilton 2, Lacey 1. Who's that third and fourth receiver? So that group could potentially be just as good as last year. I don't want to say even better because I mean them. That was just different.
Right. And I agree with you there. I mean, the receivers, of course, I think, they're going to be really good. Now, Chris Hilton, he's questionable for this game. He was going to be receiver number 3. I know Kyle Parker's going to step and take that role. He looked great throughout the fall camp, and he looked great in
Mm-hmm.
the spring too. So I hope he has a big game as well. But this tight end room, really, I mean, think about Mason Taylor's the starter. I mean, he's a guy that could be, high up on draft boards when it comes to the NFL draft this upcoming year. Obviously, the son of a former Hall of Famer. But then that tight end room just in general, it's just good. Like Trey Edge, Green, Kamara, and Pimpton. I mean, you can make the case that tight end room might be better than the receiving room. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think during your time you even had a tight end room like this. So what do you have to say about the tight ends as a whole?
I think that it's a group of guys that have the size. You have a superstar in Taylor. Sometimes you may even see 2 tight ends out.
Three
Just
of
to
them.
keep the best hands on the field. So I do expect uh, Coach Salone and Coach Cartaz to be able to be creative with the skill set on that field. And you do expect to see Mason Taylor be a lot more active this year versus last year. You go back to last year, he how could I explain this? Kind of fell in the middle of the pack because of Neighbors and Thomas, just how explosive they came off. So I do expect him to have one of those Travis Kelsey type years in regards to tight ends.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And just this. I mean, this offense just has a chance to be deadly. I mean, you can even see 3 tight ends in one set because I mean, Kamara, Trey Green was really a receiver for Zachary last year. They didn't really have him on the inside. They always had him lined up out on the outside because he would not only was he faster than a lot of guys in the field, he was just bigger. Um, this offense has a chance to be really special, and then also the defense, of course, has to play their parts and becoming better defense this year. I mean, really, even in 2019, early on, they weren't a great defense. I mean, it wasn't until later in the
Yeah.
year where they made adjustments after Ole Miss that they became a lot better defense, and that's what helped them win the national championship that season. But a big part of that, on the defense, obviously has been the defensive backfield. The defensive backfield has been pretty suspect. I mean, even in 2019, they were suspect, even with Derek Stingley and Grant Delp and some of those guys. But how important is it for the defensive backfield in this game, given USC's offense is just throwing the ball down the field? And they have even though Jardine Gilbert's the veteran, I really love Jardine Gilbert as a safety back there. But this is still a youthful defensive backfield.
It is. I do think, and this is kind of personal. I know what Ashton Stamps brings to the table. I've been knowing that for years, just training with Conquer Sports, even the time he spent with DTP, Scholar Green. I mean, we used to call him midget, like legit. He was a shorty, but put that size on. I could think back to his going into his junior year at Rummel, moving from wide receiver to DB. When he made that switch, his dad called me and was like, Fave, we're gonna still have midget work with y'all on 7 work and just stuff with you and Scholar. And I suggested too that he get with Robbie Green. Does a good job at developing DBs, and Robbie legit developed him into a starting defensive back in college football, and it showed. He had a nice pick. Here's a little teaser for the viewers. He had a nice interception in the practice I attended last week, which I thought showed that he is stepping up to that deal. And I mean, you have PJ Woodland, who I think is going to be a contributor, maybe in the slot a little bit to help out. Sage Ryan, you expect him, to be that strong side corner and be the the voice, kind of like how Greg Brooks was the defense last year for, he got sick. He was the voice. You could tell everything thumped through him. Maybe get that out of Major Burns as well, playing that star position. Just being a vocal leader matters, Grant. It does, because somebody has to be, someone's plural has to communicate in order to play effectively throughout the game. And communication typically dips when stuff starts going downhill. You're down 2 touchdown scores, or um, your team just threw an interception. Your confidence is down because now the offense ain't doing nothing. Now we got to run back on the field. So who's going to be that guy on defense to be like, come on? You can expect that out of Harold Perkins a little bit, but in that secondary, to your point, who's going to be that vocal leader? So I think between the two corners, um, and the way that they competed last year, and then we had Sage at that safety. I'm not worried. I was a little worried about the secondary last year, but after, especially the Alabama game, I saw them boys held their ground. The worrying kind of went on. I feel the same way now. That's one of the strong points for USC. USC has a pretty solid receiving core. Taj, I'm trying to think of this kid out of his first name is Taj. I can't think of his last. He had like 3 touchdowns in their last bowl game.
Yeah.
And Miller Moss looked like a Heisman Trophy candidate in that bowl game, but so did Gary Nussmeier.
Right.
So it's just, all right. We know these two skill units are going to show up on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
What defense? Who's going to have 4 sacks as a defensive line this game? Which unit? Think back to the Louisville game, Arden Key last year at LSU. They had like 5, 6, 17 sacks on Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's the coming out party that one of these D-lines, I don't know if it's going to be USC D-line. I don't know if it's going to be LSU D-line. We hoping it's LSU D-line, right? But which one of these D-lines are going to come out and set the tone in terms of quarterback pressures, quarterback hits, quarterback sack? Once that starts I know what a question mark looks like.
Yeah.
Kyle Williams, Claude Roten, Melvin Oliver, Marcus Spears, all those dudes were out. They went to the league. Who's going to step up? Nobody knew what Glenn Dorsey was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that Glenn played in a few games and was supportive to Kyle. They didn't know who we were going to be. We were all new starters up the front. It wasn't like, all right, we still got Kyle Williams. Maybe Glenn Dorsey will rotate in, and then we'll see how Favorite and Alex. It was none of that. It was, okay, here are our guys. Here are the guys we're rolling with for the season. And we showed and proved. The very first 3 weeks, we set the tone. The Auburn game, I never forget that. We lost that game 7-6.
I remember that. Mm-hmm.
You remember that? It was hot, scorching. Ricky Jean Francois was born that game. I was born that game. Tyson Jackson was born in that game. And Glenn Dorsey definitely was born that game. There was no questions about LSU's defensive line after that. What happened after that? 3 weeks later, Desmond Howard comes down. We're the number 1 defensive line in the country. And we're all they're talking about 2 years in a row. But 2 years before that, we didn't know what those dudes were going to be. So that's why I'm stressing this and I'm overemphasizing this side of it. Like, come on, Tank, what you gonna do? Y'all talking, Coach Bo said, boy, he said, Fade, man, that boy must be drinking some goat milk or something.
Yeah.
He all ripped up. Yeah, like,
yeah.
Look like Tarzan and play like Tarzan. That's what it's gonna be about for LSU.
Yeah. Right. And the one thing I like about this defense is that there's just a lot, this year there's a lot of depth in the cornerback room. I know they're pretty young, but Asher Stance, PJ Woodland, Zy Alexander seems like he's getting a lot healthier since tearing his ACL last year, and he was the leader in interceptions before he went down. I think I've already mentioned Jair Brown, but I think I haven't. Jared Brown's another player. J.K. Johnson's another player. I mean, there's a lot of great DBs that are coming through. Major Burns, I'd like to move to star for him. I mean, I always thought he was more of a closer to the line of scrimmage type of safety because he was a leader in tackles last year. I think a lot of people don't realize he was a leader in tackles. He's probably the best tackler on the team. I mean, even more so than Harold Perkins. And then also in the linebacker room, Greg Penn. A lot of people don't really talk about Greg Penn. Greg Penn was second in tackles with 89, and he had 2 interceptions. I mean, he's a great overall linebacker. He's the leader of the defense. He's the one that has the green dot, and I really like where the team is in terms of his leadership, and also with the coaches. With Corey Raymond is back now, Bo Davis. All the defensive coaches. That's a great defensive coaching staff. So I'm really loving how the defense, and like you said, how you compared it to the defenses you played with. I think they're very similar in that aspect. Before I let you go, I want to ask about because now they're playing on the West Coast, they're playing in Las Vegas, and I know you had a very similar experience. When you're at LSU, you guys had to travel to Arizona State in Arizona. That's a different time zones and everything. What are some of the experiences you had, traveling to Arizona State in that different time zone? And what does it take to adjust to just playing different time zones, playing at different temperatures, you name it? Because that's what LSU has to deal with, even though they're playing an indoor stadium.
I think the biggest thing more than anything else, and I would tell this to any player who's checking this out, man, the 48-hour rule. Like, if we traveling on Friday, try to start shutting it down like Wednesday evening. Don't go out Thursday night. I know that's big college night in a lot of cities. Start hydrating in because you're traveling and you're on the plane, so the plane discombobulates you. The rest is important because you're going to a different time zone, so your body is you're still up. You got to think about your body. Like your body still has to get adjusted. So if you're ahead of the A ball with the rest, the hydration, it's cool. We went out there to Arizona State. It was right after Katrina hit. They were supposed to come to us, if you remember,
Yep.
because of Katrina hit. We had to go out there. So that was my first time at AZ. So I thought that experience was cool, and it was just so much going on. I can remember the catch from early,
Yep.
Doucette that sealed the deal. Scholar had a pretty decent game that game. I remember, okay, we all traveled and we all dressed, but I can because it was supposed to be a home game, but I don't think I was on a travel squad, so I didn't play, but my boy Charles Alexander was. And talk about niche, right? And being able to do a job. Like one thing that stood out about Charles' game, and Coach Carl Dunbar really loves this. You can line him up over the center, and he can swipe the ball like when it moves. So to create a fumble, like he did that a couple times, like that was his thing. And I can remember he got in like 2 plays just to do that. So it's little bitty moments like that. I remember looking at those mountains. I remember us jumping up wild. Me and Dwayne Bowe had a freestyle after the game. Just little moments like that you remember. But on the smart side and on the preparation side, I think it is important to, and I hope that they did get that proper rest and sleep because we're going on their side. We're the West Coast. We the ones traveling.
Right. Right. USC, no, they have to travel too, but they're already acclimated to the times because Las Vegas is already in Pacific time. So, that's a great perspective from you just from traveling to Arizona State. That's probably one of the greatest games in LSU history right there, just because it happened right after Katrina. You guys had to travel out there to Arizona State, who was a very good team at that time. And then also just the play of Jamarcus throwing the game-winning touchdown on the run. Like, I mean, that was a great throw. I mean, Jamarcus was a hell of a quarterback. Man, one of the more talented players that ever played in the purple and gold. But yeah, thanks a lot, Marlon, for hopping on, sharing your perspective on LSU football and previewing the game against USC. Have a good rest of your weekend and go Tigers.
Go Tigers. You do the same, bro. Thanks for having me.
Sure. No
Hello,
problem.
somebody.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. That's Marlon Favorite, former LSU defensive lineman from '04 to '08, and was a member of the 2007 national championship team, and also played in the NFL for a few years. Um, Once again, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also find the podcast on Spotify. And then also make sure to give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you guys next week, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Labor Day weekend.